process of taking it apart. As they removed the parts, they spread them out on a heavy wooden table, otherwise used for cleaning fish, shucking corn, and sorting potatoes. As the parts were removed, the valve covers, spark plugs, cylinder head, gaskets, pistons, rings, and all right down to the oil pan. They were carefully washed in a pan of gasoline, sorted and set aside. The parts were sorted to see which parts could be salvaged or discarded. A list was made of what was needed, and a trip was made downtown to the Western Auto Store. The man behind the parts counter started putting the order. The old Chevy needed rings, bearings, gaskets, spark plugs, an oil filter, and an air filter. When the order was completed, my father called me to go home. I'd been looking at the new bicycles. One Sunday afternoon after dinner, they started putting the engine back together. With an extension cord and a trouble light hung over a tree, they continued to work after dark. During the week after work, my father would go out back, take the tarp off the back, and put on a few more parts. By the following Saturday, it was time to put the block back on the chassis. It was hoisted off the table, eased into place, and bolted down. Once the block was in place, all the other parts, the oil pump, fuel pump, and carburetor distributor and starter, could be attached. After further fitting and tightening, they started it up, and with a little more tuning, it ran great. The Chevy was our family car until 1954. It was replaced by a 1948 Kaiser, another black sedan. My father could only afford to buy used cars, and repairability was a consideration. Both the Chevy and the Kaiser had windshields comprised of two plates of flat glass. When the first cars came out in the 1950s, the streamlined windshields made of one single piece of molded glass. My father remarked that would be mighty expensive to replace. An inline engine was easier to work on than a V6 or V8. A standard shift transmission was cheaper to repair than an automatic. While my father was comfortable working on engines because he had been an aircraft mechanic during the war, he would not hesitate to tackle the wringer washer on the back porch, the oil stove, plumbing, or wiring, all with varying degrees of success. When he was working on something, he would have me stand by him and watch him, hand him a wrench or part or hold something while he tightened it. Every now and then he would say, "Watch now what I'm doing. One day you're going to have to do this." Somehow, even when I was 10 or 12, I couldn't see myself fixing the washing machine. I did pay more attention when he worked on the car. In a couple of years, I hope to be driving it. I learned to check the oil, the tire pressure, and change tires. My father and my uncles worked on their own cars just to keep them running. Our next door neighbor, Leonard Riley, worked full-time for Brody's Body Shop in downtown. Leonard often brought his work home with him. If an insurance adjuster had declared a car totaled and paid off the claim, Leonard would take a look at it, offer the adjuster $50 or $100, and tow it back home to his backyard. There, on evenings and weekends, he would take the wreck apart, beat out the bumps and dents, and put it back together. Leonard was considered a little rough around the edges, especially by the church-going ladies in the neighborhood, especially on Sunday mornings. But he was friendly and a hard worker, and that counted for a lot. He also had a big German Shepherd, Champ, who watched over the cars in his backyard, let everyone know, strangers wandering through, that he was there. Leonard kept at it, buying cars, repairing them, and selling them. 10 years later, he opened the first Toyota dealership in town. Many teenage boys acquired their first cars by buying an old wreck, getting it running and getting it running again. My cousin Lewis, who lived in Jacksonville, Florida, bought an old 19 Mercury for $50 and drove it up to Rocky Mountain. At least it leaked a lot of oil, but with new gaskets, he was able to drive back home and kept it for another 2 years and sold it for $38 when he went into the Navy. 15 or so years later, he bought a 1956 Chevy, a project to restore. Over a number of years, he brought it back to mint condition, and he still drives it. He assures me that there are no computer chips in the vehicle. During the 1950s and 60s, there were many changes made to cars. Not just a huge fin and large chrome grills, but changes to improve safety and drivability. Power steering and automatic transmission, improved heating and air conditioning, added comfort. Power brakes and seat belts improved safety. Each of these devices was mechanical. While more complex, they were fixable. I'm going to read this again. Each of these devices was mechanical, and while more complex, were fixable. In the 1970s, many electronic systems were introduced. Among the first was the engine diagnostic computer, which assessed engine performance. Among the first was the engine diagnostic computer, which assessed engine performance. You could take your car to a dealership, and a technician would plug in your car and check the engine. Of course, if you bought your car used, equipped with such a device, or lived several hundred miles from an authorized dealer, it was as useful as a brick. In the 80s and 90s, many power options were offered to new car buyers. Adjustable seats, adjustable mirrors, power windows, floor locks, trunk openers. Each of these devices was operated by a small electric motor, which cost hundreds of dollars. The dashboard with an analog speedometer, odometer, gas gauge, and pressure gauge had been replaced by touchscreen computerized instrument panel and digital readouts for remaining driving time based on current speed and fuel consumption. There is a tire pressure monitor for each tire. The heater has become a climate control system, which now includes individual heated seats, cool seats. Many systems are now automatic, activated by dozens of sensors, analyzing current conditions and surroundings. Inflatable airbags are now standard. Lights turn on and dim automatically. There are rear and side view mirrors and automatic braking based on the perception of danger. Your vehicle's navigation and communication systems are based on the global positioning satellites and the internet. When these are activated, you can never be lost, even if you want to be lost. If your car breaks down, a service truck can be sent to your aid by pressing a button. If your vehicle has been stolen, the police can easily find it. As well, if you fail to make your monthly payments on time, the repo man from the finance company can also find it. The vehicles we drive today can no longer be repaired by their owners, or even maintained for that matter. The inability to fix their own cars has deprived many car owners of a certain sense of independence. Periodically, your dealership emails you a notification to make an appointment for oil change, tire rotation, winterizing, engine check, or other service. You are admonished to do this promptly so that your warranty can be maintained. Check the fine print. In the 1950s, styles and models were distinctive. We could recognize a Ford, a Chevy, a Plymouth, or especially a Cadillac or Lincoln from blocks away. On rainy Saturday afternoons, my cousins Louis, Clarence, and I would sit on my grandmother's front porch and count cars. One of us would take Fords, including Mercury's and Lincolns, the other GMC products, including Chevys, Pontiacs, Oldsmobiles. The third would take Plymouths, Dodges, Chryslers, etc. We would keep score with a pencil and paper. This tally might go on for an hour or two until the rain stopped. Over the summer, we became strong advocates for our choices. Today, I find it less easy to distinguish between Hondas, Toyotas, Volkswagens, Hyundais, Nissans, or Buicks and Chryslers for that matter. There must always be choices for competition, for a competitive market to exist. Now there's another choice to make. That is a choice of whether to purchase a gasoline or electric vehicle. We're told that cars will soon all be electric powered. Until the power grid is fully complete, it might be a good idea to equip these e-vehicles with small folding battery carts for a hike to the charging station for a boost. There's much to consider. In the meantime, there's an old gasoline-powered lawnmower in the shed, but you can just get it to run. I'm thinking about Bruce Dern and film Nebraska. But where's the gas station? Okay, that was it. Usually the ball gets rolling. The incongruity of that is what gets the conversation started. The questions often begin with, where did they come from? How did you get them? How are they used? The original home of these two specimens was eastern North Carolina. For the previous 40 years, before they migrated to Canada, they'd been sitting on the living room hearth of my parents' house down in Rocky Mountain. They'd come from our Uncle T, who was our mother's brother-in-law, Terry Dickens. After the war, he had married my Aunt Katie, and they shared a house with my parents, me, and my sister. They had no children, and they spoiled us. Aunt Katie had had diabetes since she was a child, and one night she died of insulin shock. It was a sad time for a while. Within a year, my Uncle T sold a small grocery store and moved down to Little Washington on the Pamlico River, about 60 miles away. Washington, North Carolina, population 8,000 or so, was called Little Washington to distinguish it from Washington, D.C., or Big Washington. There he went into the scrap and iron and metal business with his brother-in-law, Clarence Rawls, the Washington Iron and Metal Company. Uncle T remarried and started a new life. He eventually married 3 more times. He once said a fortune teller told him he would be married 6 times. For the rest of his life, though, he kept in touch with our family, especially my grandmother. Occasionally on Sunday afternoon visits, he would bring something for my mother. Occasionally while watching the yard crane load scrap iron and steel into a railway gondola for shipping, sometimes interesting things would catch his eye. He would have the operator stop the crane, go over, and pull out of the pile and pull something out of the pile and set it aside. It might be a cast iron washpot, a iron horse head, hitching post, or a discarded lawn jockey. He knew my mother would take an old pot, paint it, and use it as a flower planter or bird bath. On one of his visits, after sitting a while and having coffee with my parents, Uncle T went out to the car, opened the trunk, and took out a pair of cast iron duck decoys. These things weigh over 20 pounds each. He brought them to the house, to the porch, and set them down one at a time. Then he told us a little bit about what they were and where they had come from. He said they had originally been used by duck and geese market hunters. Their use, along with punt guns, had been outlawed in the early 1900s. During World War II, there were scrap iron metal drives to support the war effort. And many of these iron ducks were brought into the yard. They were worth 10 cents a piece as scrap iron. Living in the uplands, folks didn't do much. Living in the uplands, people didn't do much wild waterfowl hunting. There was some subsistence hunting for rabbits, squirrels, raccoons, and partridges. Deer were not very plentiful since the Depression. Down east below Little Washington, in the waters of Pamlico, Albemarle, and Currituck Sounds, it was a different matter. The swamps and marshes of the tidewater offered an abundant food supply for ducks and geese migrating along the Atlantic flyways, as well overwintering grounds that were ice-free. Local hunters had always hunted there, but by the 1800s, market hunters had begun exploiting the plentiful supplies of ducks and geese for profit. This practice took place from Long Island Sound in the north to the coastal waters of Louisiana and Texas. It was most profitable near the largest cities, but with the spread of railways after the Civil War, the market for wild birds grew exponentially. By 1900, the Currituck Sound hunters were harvesting as many as 100,000 birds a year, just in Currituck County. As the market grew, the techniques for hunting waterfowl evolved. The traditional weapons of duck hunters was a single or double-barrel 12-gauge shotgun, either muzzle-loaded or breech-loaded, charged with black powder and round-lead shot. By the early 19th century, the weapon of choice for market hunters had become the punt gun. This gun was over 10 feet long and weighed as much as 100 pounds. The barrels were a quarter-inch thick. It was loaded with a large charge of black powder and 2 pounds of lead shot. Accompanying the punt was a flat wooden raft loaded with 200 pounds of cast iron ducks. The technique of the hunt was to tow the submerged raft into place. The gun punt, covered with brush, was poled into the marsh 40 or 50 yards from the raft. The hunter crouched low in the stern of the punt and waited. At first, a few ducks would land among the decoys, and when they were settled, a few more came down. When there were a few dozen on the water, the hunter would take his single shot. The gun roared. The punt shuddered from the recoil, and hundreds of birds took off the marsh. They would not come back that day. The hunter then rode out and collected his quarry, often as many to as 50 as 100 ducks. The decoys were unharmed. That's why they were cast iron. By the late 1800s, it became clear that the number of waterfowl were dwindling. State legislatures and conservationists and sport hunters began passing laws regulating limits, the length of hunting seasons, and the type of weapons and methods of hunting that were permitted. The use of punt guns, iron decoys, were clearly prohibited. Uncle T's own duck hunting experience began one fall in the late 1950s. His partner Clarence came into the yard office with a shotgun and a couple of ducks. He told T that there were a lot of birds along the marsh alongside the road, a few miles out of town. Things were slow in the yard that morning, so T took the shotgun and a box of shells and drove off. On his way to the marsh, he stopped at a gas station for a cold drink and some cheese crackers. The man behind the counter asked T where he was headed. He said, duck hunting. The clerk said several fellows had stopped by earlier and they had had some luck down near Goose Creek. T thanked the man and drove off east along the north side of the river. When he got to the creek, he turned off the paved road and continued down the gravel track between the road and the marsh. After a mile or two, T pulled over, took out his 12 gauge, loaded both barrels, sat and waited. He heard the occasional shot in the far distance, but otherwise it was pretty quiet. It wasn't long before a few ducks came down and landed in the shallow waters on the grassy bank and began feeding. From his semi-covered position, T took careful aim and fired, first one barrel and then the other in quick succession. A dozen or so birds rose and flew away. He walked over and picked up 2 dead ducks and put them in his bag. Then he drove down the road a mile or two, and further there he pulled over and again shot 3 more ducks. He thought that was enough for one day. He would keep 2 and give the others to neighbors. On his way back into town, T stopped at the same gas station he had stopped at that morning. The owner came out and filled his gas tank. After T paid him, the man asked how the duck hunting had gone. T said, pretty good. I shot 5. The owner said, 5? The limit is 2. T looked up at him and replied quizzically, limit? The owner then warned, you better hope the game warden doesn't catch you. You could lose your license. T paused, turned his head, and said, license? T nodded, thanked the man, and drove on. I'm not sure if Uncle T ever got around to buying a license, but I do remember one Thanksgiving he brought my grandma a nice wild goose. Wild goose is a lot tastier than store-bought turkey, if you don't mind an old odd shot pellet. Okay.